Hello everyone, welcome to my channel.
The Devil's Tide. Chapter 1. The Gallows and the Sea. The rain had not stopped for 3 days, and by dawn of the fourth it seemed that heaven itself had grown tired of mercy. In the yard of Newgate Prison the mud was ankle-deep, the gallows slick with a shining coat of rainwater. Crows lined the beam like a jury of the damned, waiting. The air stank of iron and rope, and beneath it all the faint salt of the sea that no London storm could wash away. Captain Elias Thorne, once the terror of the western waters, stood barefoot upon the scaffold, his wrists bound in rough hemp. His coat, the dark blue of a dead admiral, hung in tatters. His hair, long and black as pitch, clung to his temples. Around his neck the hangman's noose looked almost ornamental, as though it had been made for him long ago. The crowd was vast, despite the weather. Merchants, urchins, beggars, thieves. They had come to see the pirate die, to witness the fall of a legend who had stolen from the king's navy, raided merchant fleets, and vanished for 2 years into the fog of myth. They shouted his name now, some in hatred, some in drunken reverence. "Thorne, Thorne of the Blackwater, tell us where ye hid the gold. Aye, show us the devil's treasure afore ye swing." Thorne did not answer. His gaze was fixed beyond the prison gates, where the horizon was a gray smear of rain and chimney smoke. Somewhere beyond that lay the sea, the only mistress he had ever loved, and the one who had betrayed him most completely. When the hangman placed the hood over his head, Thorne felt a strange calm. Perhaps, at last, the debt would be paid. "Captain Elias Thorne," cried the magistrate, "you have been found guilty of piracy, mutiny, and murder upon the high seas. By order of His Majesty's court, you are to be hanged by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on your soul." The trap-door creaked beneath Thorne's boots. Somewhere in the crowd a woman screamed. Thunder rolled overhead, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then chaos. A crash of musket fire shattered the moment. The hangman jerked back, the rope fell loose, and shouts erupted from the yard. Smoke clouded the gallows. Men in oilskins surged from the crowd, striking at the guards with clubs and knives. Through the haze a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, face hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. Thorne felt strong hands seize him. The hood was torn away. He blinked against the rain and saw the stranger's eyes, gray as pewter, cold as the sea in winter. "Captain," the man said, his voice low and clear amid the din, "your time is not yet come. England still has use for you." Before Thorne could speak, the trap-door gave way, not beneath him, but behind, where a guard had stumbled. The crowd screamed. The stranger dragged Thorne backward, down the scaffold side, into the shadows beyond. They fled through the alleyways like hunted beasts. The city roared behind them, bells clanging, soldiers shouting, muskets firing. The rain fell harder, washing blood and mud into the gutters. At last the stranger led him to the river, where a small boat waited beneath the pier, half concealed among the pilings. Thorne was shoved aboard, breathless. The stranger followed, taking the oars. The current caught them at once, drawing them into the heart of the Thames, where the black water writhed under the storm. "Who are you?" Thorne demanded. "What devil sends you to steal me from the rope?" "Call me what you wish," the man replied, rowing with grim precision. "I am a messenger, and I come with an offer." "An offer?" Thorne laughed bitterly. "The king offers me the hangman's knot, and you offer me what? Another chain?" "Freedom, of a sort." He reached into his coat and drew forth a folded parchment, sealed with black wax. "This," he said, "is a deed, a property on the coast of Cornwall, called Blackwater Manor. It is yours, should you choose to accept it." Thorne stared at him, uncomprehending. "A manor? You jest." "I do not. It is the wish of your benefactor that you live, Captain Thorne, that you begin anew." Thorne's laughter turned hollow. "There is no new beginning for men like me." The stranger said nothing. Only the oars spoke, dipping rhythmically into the river's dark skin. Lightning flashed. In that brief light, Thorne saw the man's face more clearly, unlined, almost ageless, but pale as bone. His eyes caught the light and did not release it. "Who is this benefactor of mine?" Thorne asked quietly. "You will know when you reach the manor. And if I refuse, then I shall return you to Newgate, and you may finish what was begun today." Thorne looked out over the water, where the lightning shuddered and the wind carried the stench of the tide. Somewhere far downstream, he thought, he heard the moan of a ship's bell. He took the parchment. "To hell with it, then. The devil has had my soul long enough. He may as well lend me his roof." The stranger's lips curved, though it was not quite a smile. "Wise choice, Captain." The journey to Cornwall took 3 days. Thorne traveled in silence, hidden beneath the cloak the stranger had given him. He spoke little, ate less, and dreamed not at all. When at last they reached the coast, the air was salt and wind, and the cliffs rose jagged as broken teeth against the sky. Blackwater Manor stood upon the highest of them. It was a vast, brooding house of grey stone, its windows shuttered, its chimneys long cold. The front gates hung crooked on rusted hinges. The gardens had gone to ruin, choked by nettles and thorn. Yet even in its decay there was grandeur, a kind of stubborn pride that clung to the walls like lichen. As Thorne stepped from the carriage, the wind tore at his coat and filled his ears with the sound of waves crashing far below. The stranger gestured toward the house. "Your home, Captain. It has waited long for your return." Thorne frowned. "My return? I have never set foot in this place." "Not in this life," the man murmured. Before Thorne could question him, the stranger turned away, cloak whipping in the gale. "My duty is done. What follows is yours to bear." "Wait! Who are you truly?" Thorne called. But the man was already walking toward the cliff's edge. A moment later, a gust of mist rose from the sea, and when it cleared, he was gone. Thorne stood alone before the house, the deed heavy in his hand. The wind howled through the broken chimneys like a beast in pain. Somewhere within the manor, a door creaked open, slowly, as if the house itself were waking. And though Thorne would swear later that no living soul had been near him, he heard, from deep within the halls, a voice whisper his name, Elias. He lit no fire that night. The house seemed to breathe around him, boards sighing, shutters shuddering, wind moving through unseen cracks. In the drawing room he found portraits blackened with age, a line of stern-faced men and women, each bearing eyes uncannily like his own. In one painting, the figure of a man in naval dress stood before a ship called the Wraith. Thorne froze. It could not be. The name was a curse, yet there it was, etched into the gilt frame as clearly as if painted yesterday. He stepped closer. The man in the portrait, tall, dark-haired, eyes of pale gray, might have been his reflection had the brush not been laid a century earlier. Beneath the nameplate, an inscription, Captain Elias Thorne, 1682 to 1720, lost at sea. The room felt suddenly colder. The wind rattled the shutters, and from somewhere deep in the walls came a low, hollow sound, half sigh, half moan, as if the house were remembering. Thorne turned from the portrait. On the table nearby lay an old sea chest, its lid slightly ajar. Within, something gleamed. He reached inside and drew out a spyglass, its brass casing tarnished but intact. The initials E.T. were engraved upon it. When he lifted it to the window and looked toward the sea, lightning split the horizon, and for a heartbeat he saw it. A ship. Black sails, broken masts, riding the waves where no ship could possibly be, not in such a storm. The Wraith. Thorne lowered the glass, heart hammering. The sea was empty once more. Yet in that emptiness he thought he heard the faint toll of a bell. He slept little. When dawn came, gray and cold, he found himself still seated by the window, the spyglass in his lap. Outside, the cliffs smoked with mist. Gulls wheeled and screamed above the waves. Below, he could make out the remains of a cove, jagged rocks, the carcass of an old pier. As he watched, a figure appeared upon the shore, a woman cloaked in black, walking slowly along the water's edge. Even from this distance, Thorne felt the strangeness of her, how the tide seemed to draw toward her, how the gulls fell silent as she passed. When he blinked, she was gone. By noon he had explored half the manor, the dust-choked library, the grand staircase with its railing eaten by salt, the ballroom where echoes still waltzed in the air. In the study he found a map of the Cornish coast, marked with inked symbols, crosses, circles, and one word scrawled in the margin, the debt. He traced the coastline with his finger until it rested on a name, Blackwater Cove. The same place he had seen the woman, the same place, he realized with a chill, where the Wraith had gone down. A storm rose suddenly that afternoon, fierce and without warning. The sea roared against the cliffs, rain hammered the windows. Thorne stood before the hearth, staring into the empty grate. He thought of the gallows, of the gray-eyed stranger, of the ghostly ship upon the waves. He poured himself a measure of rum from an old decanter and raised it to the empty room. "To the dead," he said softly, "and to whatever devils keep them company." The wind howled in reply. That night he dreamed of the sea. He was aboard the Wraith again, the deck awash with rain, the crew shouting. Lightning flared, revealing faces twisted by fear. The water rose higher, black and shining, and out of it came a hand, pale, clawed, grasping for him. He struck it away, but another came, and another, until the deck was crawling with drowned men, their eyes open, their mouths full of salt. "Elias, you left us," they whispered. He awoke gasping, the storm still raging beyond the walls. In the window's reflection, for the briefest instant, he thought he saw someone standing behind him, a man in a soaked naval coat, eyes gray as the deep. Then the lightning flashed, and he was alone. When morning broke, calm at last, the world seemed cleansed. The sea lay still as glass. Thorne went down to the cliffs, drawn by a compulsion he could not name. The path wound through gorse and heather, slick from the night's rain, until it reached a narrow trail descending to the shore. There, upon the wet sand, he found a single object washed ashore, a locket. Inside was a miniature portrait of a woman, a face he did not know, yet somehow remembered. On the reverse, etched so faintly he could scarcely read it, were words that froze the breath in his chest. "To Elias, the sea remembers." He looked up, heart pounding. The tide was rising fast. Far out on the horizon, a ship's shape began to form in the mist. The Wraith. Chapter 2. Blackwater Manor. The sun rose pale and reluctant over the Cornish cliffs, as though it feared what light might awaken. A shroud of mist clung to the moorland, thick and wet as breaths. Through it, the silhouette of Blackwater Manor loomed, its spires crooked, its chimneys smoking faintly, as if the house itself exhaled. Captain Elias Thorne stood at the edge of the cliffs, the locket cold in his palm. The tide hissed below, white fingers reaching for the rocks. The words etched into the trinket, "The sea remembers," echoed in his mind like a curse. He turned the locket once more, half expecting the face within to change. It did not. The woman's eyes, painted in delicate strokes, seemed to look through him. She could have been 30, perhaps less. Raven hair, pale skin, lips touched with melancholy. No name, no clue, only that haunting inscription. Thorne slipped the locket into his coat and made his way back up the cliff path. The air grew colder as he neared the house. Somewhere within the fog a bell tolled, a slow, deliberate sound that carried neither from church nor ship. He paused, listening. The note lingered too long, as if wrung from beneath the earth. When he reached the manor gates, he found them standing open. The great hall greeted him like the inside of a tomb. Shafts of weak sunlight fell through cracked windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced like ash. The portraits upon the walls watched him, stern ancestors in powdered wigs and lace, each rendered with a precision that bordered on accusation. Their eyes, gray and unyielding, followed every one of his steps. He had seen those eyes before, in the mirror, in the storm. In himself. A noise stirred from the west wing, a faint scraping, like the drag of cloth against stone. Thorne's hand went to the pistol at his belt. The weapon was old, but he had cleaned and loaded it the night before. He moved quietly down the corridor, boots sinking into the threadbare carpet. The sound grew clearer. A door stood ajar at the hall's end. Beyond it, a glimmer of movement. Thorne pushed it open. A woman knelt upon the floor, scrubbing the tiles with a bucket of gray water. Her hair was the color of dried wheat, bound with a ribbon gone limp from years of use. She did not startle at his approach, only looked up, her expression unreadable. "You must be the new master," she said. Her voice held the faint lilt of the western coast. "Captain Thorne, is it?" He lowered the pistol, though not entirely. "And you are—" "Mrs. Harlow, sir. Housekeeper, or what's left of one. Been keeping the place since the last Thorne died." "The last Thorne?" His brow furrowed. "There were others before me?" She gave a small, humorless smile. "Always have been. The house don't belong to no one else. Never has, never will." Thorne studied her. She was perhaps 40, her face weathered but kind. Yet her eyes flicked constantly toward the windows, as though wary of something unseen. "You live here alone?" "Only me now, sir. The others left, said the place was cursed." She hesitated, then added, "Can't say as I blame them." Thorne gave a dry laugh. "And yet you stayed." "Some debts ain't so easily paid, Captain." Before he could ask what she meant, a sudden knock echoed through the manor. 3 slow raps upon the front door. Both turned. Mrs. Harlow's face blanched. "Don't answer that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because it means death walks abroad." Thorne frowned. "Superstition, maybe. But I've lived in this house near 20 years, and I've learned one thing. When the sea fog's thick and the knocker sounds 3 times, it's not the living that call." Thorne ignored her warning. He crossed the hall, boots ringing against the tiles, and threw open the door. Mist poured inside like smoke. No one stood upon the step. Only a single object lay at his feet, a length of weathered rope, frayed and wet with sea-water. At one end it formed a perfect hangman's noose. That night the wind rose again. It came in fits and moans, rattling shutters and wailing down the chimneys. The manor seemed to respond, boards creaking, doors sighing in their frames, glass trembling in its lead. Thorne sat by the hearth, staring into the flames. The rope lay upon the mantel where he had set it, coiled like a sleeping serpent. Mrs. Harlow had vanished to her quarters after supper, muttering prayers. Thorne remained, unwilling to surrender to sleep and its visions. Instead, he poured himself another measure of rum and unfolded the deed that the stranger had given him. The handwriting was old, ink faded, edges brittle. The property's boundaries were marked in careful script, and beneath the formal legal phrasing ran a line that chilled him. All lands, holdings, and ancestral rights pertaining to the Thorne lineage, under oath to the sea. He traced the words with his thumb. What oath, what binding could tie a family name to water? The fire crackled softly. Somewhere above, a floorboard groaned, slow and deliberate, as though a foot had stepped upon it. Thorne stood, pistol in hand, and moved toward the stair. Each step creaked under his weight. The corridor above was dark, lined with doors half open, their rooms beyond swallowed in shadow. Another sound, closer now, the faint scrape of boots along the floorboards. He raised the pistol. "Who's there?" His voice echoed back to him, hollow. Silence. He took one more step, and the candle flickered violently. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw something, a figure at the far end of the hall, standing half in light, half in shadow. A sailor's coat dripping with water, a face pale and blank. Then the candle guttered out, and the figure was gone. When he relit the flame, the floor was wet where it had stood. Morning came gray and sickly. Mrs. Harlow entered the dining room carrying a tray of bread and weak tea. Her eyes went at once to the damp footprints leading to the stair. She said softly, "You saw them, didn't you?" Thorne set down his cup. "Saw who?" "The drowned." He stared at her. "You speak of ghosts." "I speak of the sea's own," she said. "They come when the tide's high and the fog thickens, looking for him who wronged them." "Who wronged them?" Her gaze fixed on him. "The name Thorne has always drawn the tide." He laughed, though uneasily. "Nonsense! The sea does not remember men." Mrs. Harlow's eyes were steady. "Then why does it whisper your name, Captain?" That afternoon Thorne ventured down to the village that lay a mile inland, a scattering of cottages, a small church, and an inn called the Drowned Lamb. The townsfolk stared as he entered, their conversations dying mid-sentence. Even the innkeeper, a stout man with a scarred cheek, hesitated before speaking. "What'll it be, sir?" "Rum," said Thorne, "and information." The man poured a measure with trembling hands. "You're from the manor, aren't you?" "So it seems." A murmur went through the room. Thorne felt their eyes upon him, furtive, fearful. He took a slow sip of the rum and let the silence stretch. "I'm told the house has a history," he said at last. "Perhaps you'll tell me what kind." The innkeeper glanced toward the door, as though afraid of being overheard. "Best you leave that place be, Captain. Nothing up there but bad luck and older things." "Older things?" The man leaned close. "They say the Thornes made a pact generations ago. Smugglers they were, wreckers too. Lured ships onto the rocks with false lights. When one night they took a vessel that shouldn't have been touched, a ship carrying the king's gold, the sea rose up against them. Since then, no Thornes died on dry land." Thorne's lips tightened. A sailor's tale. "Maybe so," the innkeeper straightened. "But you mark me, every man of your name that's lived in that house has gone back to the water in the end." Thorne finished his drink in silence. As he turned to leave, an old woman in the corner spoke, her voice a rasp of wind through reeds. "The widow on the cliff watches you now. Best not look her in the eyes, Captain. She sees too much." He paused. "Who is she?" The woman smiled, revealing teeth like yellow shells. "You'll know her when the tide turns." That evening, as Thorne climbed the path back toward the manor, he saw her. A lone figure stood upon the cliff edge, cloak whipping in the wind. the same woman he had glimpsed from the window days before. Her face was hidden by the hood, but something about her posture, tall, still, unafraid of the drop beneath her, sent a tremor through him. He called out, "Madam!" She did not move. He approached cautiously. The ground beneath his boots was soft with moss and rain. When he was a dozen paces away, she turned. Her face was pale, beautiful, and utterly unfamiliar. Yet her eyes, dark as the depths below, held an ancient recognition. "You should not have come here," she said. Thorne stopped. "You know my name?" "I know all who bear it." She looked past him toward the manor. "The manor wakes again. The sea stirs. You've brought the storm back with you." "Who are you?" he demanded. She gave a faint smile. "They call me the widow on the cliff, but names are like tides, they change." "The villagers say you're a witch." Her smile did not fade. "I see what others fear to see." "And what do you see when you look at me?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A man marked by water, one who escaped the noose, but not his fate." A gust of wind tore at them, carrying the scent of salt and rot. When it passed, she was already turning away, her cloak vanishing into the fog. "Wait!" Thorne called. "What do you mean?" Her voice drifted back through the mist. "The debt must be paid, Captain, and the sea never forgets." That night he could not sleep. He sat by the window, the spyglass in hand, staring out over the moonlit sea. The waves shimmered faintly under the silver light. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, the wraith had gone down, and yet he could not shake the feeling that it still sailed beneath the surface, prowling the depths like a beast in waiting. At midnight, a light appeared offshore. A single lantern, swaying in the darkness. He lifted the glass. The lantern hung from the bow of a ship, black sails tattered, masts broken. The Wraith. And on its deck, figures moved, slow, spectral, gliding rather than walking. Their faces pale, their eyes hollow. As Thorne watched, one of them raised a hand and pointed directly toward him. Then the light went out. He woke at dawn to the sound of waves breaking hard against the cliffs. The manor seemed colder than before, the walls slick with damp. On the table beside him lay something that had not been there when he slept. A single seashell, white as bone. When he lifted it, he heard the faint sound of rushing water, and beneath it, whispers. Elias, Elias Thorne. He crushed the shell in his fist, but the whispers did not stop. They echoed in his mind long after the fragments fell to the floor. Chapter 3. The Widow on the Cliff. The morning came raw and blue, the sea still restless from the night before. Gray mist crawled inland from the water, swallowing the cliffs, the moors, even the crooked chimneys of Blackwater Manor. Captain Elias Thorne stood at his window, staring out at the endless churn of waves. He had not slept. The fragments of the seashells still lay on the floor, scattered like the bones of a small creature. The manor groaned around him as if in pain. from somewhere within its depths came the faint drip of water, steady, patient, unending. He thought of the widow's words, "The debt must be paid." He dressed quickly, pulling on a heavy coat and his sea boots, and descended the staircase. Mrs. Harlow was nowhere to be seen. A fire smoldered weakly in the hearth, the ashes gray as old sorrow. Thorne found a crust of bread on the table, but the moment he lifted it, he noticed something beneath it, a mark, faint and circular, burned into the wood. It was the shape of a coin, a doubloon. He brushed the ashes away. The imprint gleamed faintly, as though still hot. He took a breath and left the manor. The path to the cliffs was slick with dew. The wind had quieted, but the sea's voice rose in its place, a deep, ceaseless murmur like the breathing of some vast creature. The tide was low, revealing black rocks glistening with salt. Gulls circled overhead, silent for once. Halfway down the path, he saw her. The widow on the cliff stood at the edge of the precipice, her dark cloak trailing like ink. Her bare feet rested upon the slick stone as if it were dry earth. When she turned, her eyes caught the light. Blue, but not the blue of sky or water. Something colder, older. "I wondered when you'd come," she said. Thorne stopped a few paces behind her. "You speak as if you knew I would." "Of course." Her gaze drifted toward the horizon. "The sea told me." He frowned. "You talk to the tide, then?" "I listen." She bent and picked up a piece of driftwood, turning it in her hands. "And it listens back." "The sea is a living thing, Captain Thorne. It has a memory. It remembers every name whispered to it, every life taken, every promise broken." He felt the locket heavy against his chest. "Then tell me this, what does it remember of me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Everything." Her words hung in the air, carried by the wind. "I saw my ship," he said quietly. "2 nights past, the Wraith. I watched her ghost upon the water." The widow nodded. "She sails still, beneath the waves, her crew bound to her hull, their souls tethered by your oath." "My oath?" "You swore to the sea, Captain, on the night of the storm." Thorne's throat tightened. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Her voice softened, almost kind. "Do you remember the night you were lost?" Images came unbidden. Thunder, the ship lurching beneath him, the mast splitting with a scream of wood, his men crying out, the treasure hold flooding, and amid it all, a voice whispering from the depths, offering salvation. "Deliver them," it said. The widow murmured, as if reading his thoughts. "Give them to me, and you shall live." Thorne staggered back. "How do you know that?" "Because I was there," she said simply. He stared at her. "You—" She raised a hand, silencing him. "I was there when you made the bargain, Elias Thorne. I saw the sea take your ship, and I saw it spare you. The storm should have swallowed you whole, yet it did not. You washed ashore with nothing but breath and guilt." Thorne's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you?" She smiled faintly, though sorrow flickered behind it. "Something the sea made long ago." Lightning flickered far out at sea, though no thunder followed. "Why have you come to me?" he asked. "To warn you. The sea's patience wanes. Its debt must be settled." "And what debt is that?" "The souls you gave it, your crew." He clenched his fists. "They were already lost." "They were promised." The word struck him like a blow. The tide hissed against the rocks below, as if in agreement. The widow stepped closer. "There is one chance for you, Captain. One way to break the chain." He met her gaze. "Tell me." "You must find the heart of the debt, the gold you stole, the treasure that lies in the hold of the wraith. Return it to the deep willingly, and the sea may forgive you." Thorne laughed bitterly. "A curse lifted by gold. Fitting." "This is no ordinary treasure," she said. "It was consecrated, blood-bound to the tide. You took what was never meant for mortal hands." The air grew colder. Thorne saw his breath rise in mist. "And if I refuse?" "Then the dead will come for you. And when they do, no land, no rope, no church will save your soul." He returned to the manor in silence. Mrs. Harlow was waiting in the hall, pale and trembling. "Where have you been, Captain?" "I?" "Speaking with your witch." Her eyes widened. "Did you see the widow?" "I." "Mrs. Harlow crossed herself. Then the curse is waking."
"Curse or not, I've business yet to settle."
She caught his arm.
"You can't face it alone." He turned sharply. "I've faced worse."
Her voice softened.
"No, Captain, you faced death. This is different. The sea does not kill, it keeps."
He pulled free and strode up the stairs, the boards groaning beneath him. In the study, he unrolled the map he'd found before. There it was again, Blackwater Cove, marked with a black X, the place where the wraith had sunk. He poured himself a glass of rum and stared at the map until dusk fell, the edges blurring in the candlelight. Finally, he spoke aloud, as if to someone unseen. "If it's my soul the sea wants, it'll have to come and take it." Outside, the tide began to rise. That night, the manor did not sleep. The wind pressed against the windows like hands. Somewhere below, a door slammed, though no one walked the halls. The smell of salt filled the air. Thorne awoke to the sound of dripping water. He lit a candle. The floorboards beneath his bed were soaked. A trail of wet footprints led to the door.
He followed them down the corridor. The prints glistened in the flickering light, bare, human, but pale as chalk. They led him to the grand staircase, then to the hall below. The front door stood ajar, the wind moaning through it. Beyond, the fog churned thick as milk. He stepped outside. The courtyard was awash in mist. The well in the center overflowed, though no rain had fallen. Water spilled down its stones, whispering, "Elias." He froze. The voice came from the darkness behind him. He turned. A man stood there, a sailor, soaked to the bone, eyes pale and luminous. Seaweed clung to his shoulders. His lips moved, but no breath came. "Jonas," Thorne whispered. "It was his first mate, dead these 2 years." "Cap'n," the voice gurgled through a throat full of water. "The sea, she waits." Thorne stepped back, heart hammering. "No, you're gone." The figure reached out a dripping hand. "Come back to us." A dozen more shapes emerged from the mist, men in torn uniforms, faces bloated and blue. They surrounded him, their mouths opening in a low moan that rose with the tide. Thorne raised his pistol. "Back!" They did not move. He fired. The shot cracked like thunder, tearing through one of the ghosts, but there was no wound, no cry, only the hiss of salt water. The figure melted into mist, reforming a heartbeat later. The well erupted, water gushing upward, glowing faintly blue. From its depths rose the tolling of a bell. The Wraith's bell. The voices of the drowned grew louder. "The debt, Elias! The debt!" He fell to his knees, clutching his head as the sound filled him. The candle he still held went out.
And in that darkness, a new voice whispered, clearer, colder. "The sea gave you life, Captain. Now it comes to reclaim it." He woke at dawn on the floor of the hall, drenched and shaking. The front door was closed. The well outside was dry. Only one thing proved the night had been real. The locket on his chest was open, though he had not touched it. Inside, the painted woman's face was gone. In its place was a scrap of damp parchment. Upon it, written in trembling ink, were 4 words: "Find the widow again."
Chapter 4. Echoes of the Wraith. The morning broke cold and silver, the sea murmuring like something restless in its sleep. Captain Elias Thorne stood before the hearth, the crumpled scrap of parchment trembling in his fingers. The words, "Find the widow again," had not faded overnight. The ink glistened faintly, as if wet with sea-water still. He turned it over, half expecting more writing on the back. None. Only the faint outline of a seashell pressed into the fibers, as though the message had been written beneath the waves themselves. Mrs. Harlow entered quietly, carrying a tray of tea. Her hands shook. "You look pale," she said. "I'm beginning to think the dead have better reason to sleep than I do." She set down the tray. "You saw them again?" I did not answer. "The widow," she whispered, "she means to draw you back to the sea." "Then I'll go, if that's where the answers lie."
By noon, the sky had darkened, though no rain fell. Thorne made his way down the cliff path once more, boots crunching over gravel, the sound swallowed by the wind. Below, the tide was rising fast, as though it anticipated him. The widow was waiting. She stood in the same place as before, the hem of her dress brushing the edge of the cliff. The wind tore at her cloak, but she did not move. "You came," she said. "You summoned me." "Not I," she murmured. "The sea." Thorne drew closer. "Then let's speak plainly. You told me the gold I took was cursed. Tell me where it lies." She looked out over the gray expanse. Do you remember the island you plundered before your final voyage, the monastery on the reef? I remember stone walls and frightened monks. They weren't monks, they were guardians. That gold was an offering, a binding between land and tide. You stole what sealed the sea's wrath.
Thorne's jaw tightened. And now it wants it back? Yes. Then I'll find it. The widow turned to him fully. You can't do it alone. The wreck lies in Blackwater Cove, where the cliffs fall sheer into the sea. The tides there obey no chart, and the dead still keep watch. He gave a dry laugh. I've faced worse than superstition. Her voice softened. Then take this. From beneath her cloak she produced a small vial filled with pale sand. From the shore where your ship was lost. Scatter it upon the water when the tide turns. It will show the way, but only if your heart is true. Thorne accepted it. The vial was cold as bone. Why help me? He asked. The widow's eyes darkened. Because once I loved a man who made the same bargain you did. Before he could speak, she stepped back into the mist and vanished. Thorne returned to the manor as night fell. Mrs. Harlow waited in the doorway, worry carved deep into her face. Captain, the sea's been uneasy all day. The fishermen refuse to sail. Then I'll sail for them, he said. You can't go alone. He smiled faintly. You keep saying that. She pressed a rosary into his hand. For luck. He pocketed it, though he hadn't prayed in years. By moonrise, the small boat was ready. The oars creaked softly as Thorne rowed toward Blackwater Cove. The cliffs loomed above like black teeth, and the surf hissed against the rocks below. He stopped when the current began to pull stronger. The water darkened to ink. This is it, he muttered. He uncorked the vial and poured the sand into the sea. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sand began to glow faintly, drifting beneath the surface like stars sinking into darkness. A shape emerged below, the outline of a ship's hull, massive and broken. The Wraith. Thorne's breath caught. He had found her. But then came a sound, faint, rhythmic, the toll of a bell. He froze. It came from beneath the water. The sea began to stir. The waves rose and fell in unnatural rhythm, and bubbles broke the surface. Something glimmed below. Coins, gold spilling from the sand. Thorne reached out, the glint of a doubloon floating just within reach. When his fingers brushed it, the water went still. Then, slowly, shapes began to rise. Men, his men, their faces pale as salt, their eyes empty, their mouths opened in silent accusation. Jonas, Thorne whispered. The first mate's voice gurgled through the water. You promised us, Captain. You promised we'd be free. I tried to save you. You bargained for your life. The sea hissed, swirling around him. The bell tolled again, closer now, until it seemed to ring inside his skull. From the shadows of the wreck, something vast moved. The twisted figurehead of the Wraith, half living, half wood,
its eyes glowing faint blue. Thorne shouted, rowing backward, but the current seized the boat and spun it toward the wreck. The ship's broken mast rose like a finger pointing to heaven, and upon it stood the widow. Her cloak rippled, though there was no wind. Her voice cut through the storm. "Elias Thorne," she called, "the sea does not forgive, but it remembers those who try to repent." Then she raised her hand. The sea shuddered. The dead sank back beneath the waves. The glow faded, and the tide released him. Thorne awoke at dawn, the boat drifting near shore. In his hand he still clutched the doubloon. It was no longer gold. It was black as ash. He staggered back up the cliff path, the weight of the coin heavy in his palm. When he reached the manor, Mrs. Harlow was waiting with a lantern. "You found it," she breathed. He nodded slowly. "And I think it found me." What now? Thorne looked toward the sea, where the first light of morning touched the horizon. "Now," he said, "I finish what I started."
Good night. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.